Hello and welcome to Comic Book Herald's Road to Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order. This game is available exclusively now on Nintendo Switch, and it is the return of the long-dormant Ultimate Alliance franchise, long one of my absolute favorite things to happen in the Marvel Comics cross-media, multimedia landscape. And has a huge influence on my own development as a Marvel Comics and comic book fan in general. So I'm going to be talking about that a little bit today, my personal history with the games. I'm also going to be talking about, again, the road to how we got here. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than my typical Road to series, where I would describe, comic books that are essential and some of the history and background that get you up to speed, maybe with the latest Marvel Comics event. Obviously, Ultimate Alliance 3, this is a reboot of the game. The developer, Team Ninja here, they've gone in, and it's a brand new game with Nintendo. They're not picking up on continuity from Ultimate Alliance or Ultimate Alliance 2, Civil War. Like, you don't need to know what happened in those games, aside from the fact that at least one of those is excellent, and the fact that there are other games outside of the Ultimate Alliance franchise that are very important. So perhaps if you're coming to these games now after the fact, it's been a decade. People have been born in that time that play video games now, as it turns out. Maybe you don't know about these games. Maybe you do, and you want to hear about them from my perspective. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the Ultimate Alliance sequence of games has impacted me as a comic book fan, how video games, I think, in general, can play a role in developing comic book fans. Because here's the thing, a lot of comic fans and Marvel Comics fans, they don't start with Marvel Comics. I know I didn't. From ages 0 to approximately 18, I barely read any comics, yet I would have absolutely said I was a Marvel fan through things like X-Men animated series, the X-Men arcade game, and things like Ultimate Alliance. So I'm going to be talking about my history with the franchise, some related comics. I am going to talk about it, to read for fans for the upcoming Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order, some things that I'm seeing connecting, and then at the very end of this, I'm going to go into my initial reactions to playing the new game itself. It came out today as I'm recording this. I played it for about a couple hours on the train. I've got some thoughts that I'm going to share, as well as maybe some of the, not as spoilers, but certainly, some of the story elements that I think will relate to comics you could read that will have share some connective tissue. So hey, if you like Comic Book Herald, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel here. Please consider subscribing on Best Comics Ever, the podcast I do. Or as always, the easiest thing you can do to help me out is just go on over to comicbookherald.com, and you can find all the content, all the Marvel reading orders, DC reading orders, everything that we're doing there. Publishing pretty much daily now with some awesome writers on the site. So I'm really proud of what we're doing. I'll probably drop this video first, but then on Monday, the 22nd, I'll be putting up the full article on Road to Ultimate Alliance 3, which is going to cover a lot of the same beats, but I'll go a little more in depth with my intimate journey with the franchise. So, looking back, there aren't many games that have meant as much to me, honestly, as Marvel's sequence of Ultimate Alliance related video games. Now, there have been 4 games that are related and set the stage, ostensibly, for Ultimate Alliance 3. Those are XMen Legends, XMen Legends 2, The Rise of Apocalypse, Ultimate Alliance, and Ultimate Alliance Civil War. I'm going to touch on those, in varying degrees as I go through here and prep for what I actually think of Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order. And one thing I just want to get on right off the bat is, it's not just that these were like parts of my comic fandom in the 2000s. These were my touchstones for the Marvel Universe from whenever X-Men Legends dropped. I believe I put here 2004 through like 2008, 2009. And I wrote this in the piece, but like, I wouldn't be going into a comic shop and collecting comics regularly until 7 years after X-Men Legends hit GameCube, which was the platform I was playing on at the time. So these were the things that were reintroducing my high school self to Marvel Universe, to characters I had never heard of before in many cases, and to how much fun and thrilling some of these big, wild comic book ideas could be. So, and I think, honestly, too, like, it's this experience for me that really ties to a period of my life growing up where, these were like the most bonding I got to do with my brothers and with family sometimes, is playing the co-op version. So that's the thing. So like the Ultimate Alliance franchise, if you're totally unfamiliar, it's a series of video games. And one of the coolest things about it is you get to pick the Marvel character you want to play as. So in X-Men Legends, the first game it dropped, you could be Wolverine, you could be Cyclops, you could be Nightcrawler. Of course, I'd be Nightcrawler. Of course. And it could be Iceman, like my weird brother. But you get to pick which hero you want to be. You get 4 on a team. You get to pick your team as well. And then 4 of you can play at the same time and go and fight the huge swaths of the Marvel Universe. Of course, in X-Men Legends, there's going to be things like Sentinels and, Magneto and all sorts of X-villains. And, we would sit in the basement and play these games for hours and hours and hours and just like absorbing everything, because there'd be dialogue with characters you could talk to who weren't playable, and learning about things like the astral plane and like, Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum, all these things were coming to me for the first time. This was how I learned a ton about the Marvel Universe, and I don't know that I'd be loving comics the way that I do today, honestly, if I hadn't played these games and enjoyed them so much. So I have to share all that up front because these games there's this nostalgic element to them that like Ultimate Alliance 3 could almost be nonsense, and I'd still be buying it day one for the DLC and everything involved because of the franchise name and what it carries. So that's what is coming into this Ultimate Alliance 3. Those are the expectations that I've set. Like I said, X-Men Legends dropped in 2004. It was out on GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox. This was developed by Raven and Activision at the time. My favorite character to play in this game, like I said, was Nightcrawler. And you can tell in X-Men Legends, it's really bare bones, getting a feel for what is this series going to be. I remember my distinct memories of X-Men Legends are a pretty classic kind of, I don't want to say by the numbers, but pretty classic. Magneto's on an asteroid and wants to do weird mutant stuff, up with his evil Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And I also distinctly remember there was a new mutant this game introduced called Magma, who was the sort of Kitty Pryde-esque, the point of view character leading you into getting to know the X-Men. And you would play as her in the intro, and you would also have to do these, like, in my memory, hours-long training montages as Magma before you could actually get to playing the game co-op. So I feel like that was the biggest flaw in that game for sure. I haven't gone back to it since, was the fact that you couldn't just get to co-op right off the bat. Nonetheless, it was fun, but mostly it was setting the stage for what was to come. And in this case, the next thing to come was X-Men Legends 2, Rise of Apocalypse. This game was released about a year later, September 2005. My favorite character to play in this game was Magneto, which gives you a sense of what made Rise of Apocalypse so cool. It was very much doing the X2 X-Men United thing, even if we go all the way back in Marvel Comics history, looking in the 80s with Chris Claremont written X-Men God Loves Man Kills graphic novel. I think it's Marvel graphic novel number 5. That's kind of a Magneto has to team up with us type story, and those tend to play very well for me. In this case, the Magneto and the Brotherhood team up with the X-Men in order to prevent the threat of Apocalypse and his 4 horsemen, and of course the help of, I don't want to call him his lackey because he's much bigger and more fun than that, Mr. Sinister. So it's a fun concept. The biggest things for me that I remember is really this game takes it up a notch, both in characters, playable characters that you can do. You can do heroes and villains. It also introduced these Blur Studios CGI cutscenes that would do like 30 seconds to a minute at a time of, basically video game movie making. And these were revolutionary for me as a young person and as a game. I mean, these are my favorite Marvel movies. Like before the MCU, they would be this moment of Apocalypse attacking the X-Mansion and Beast being home alone and trying to fend off Apocalypse, or Apocalypse and Mr. Sinister turning Warren Worthington from Angel into Archangel for the first time. These were just absolutely incredible, and that's going to be a key thing going into the next game, which is Ultimate Alliance. So we had the X-Men Legends franchise. There were only 2 games, and then basically Marvel said, how do we get bigger than Rise of Apocalypse? Because this game, we went everywhere in the X-Men universe. We touched on everything this side of the Shi'ar in space. I don't think come into it. I could be wrong because it goes everywhere. We get on the astral plane with the Shadow King. We spend time in the Savage Land. So how do you get bigger? You bring in the entire Marvel universe. In October 2006, the game was, quickly thereafter released for PS3 and Nintendo Wii. It would have been played on at this point in time. And this was the Marvel Universe game. It's an Avengers game, but with the entirety of the Marvel Universe. And I can't even quantify the number of firsts that I experienced playing Ultimate Alliance for the first time off the top of my head. I mean, it's probably the first time I was exposed to Deadpool. I feel like exposed is the right word there. It was the first time that I had ever heard of Luke Cage. And I remember my brother and I just ragging on the guy because he didn't even have a superhero name. He was just going by Luke Cage. I now realize how cool Luke Cage is and really like him as a character. At the time, I had no idea. It was just a guy named Luke. That seems strange. I mean, there's all sorts of characters that I'd been hearing of for the first time, probably places and things and ideas. This was my Marvel Universe game. More than anything, too, it had really established Doctor Doom as, I mean, one of, if not my favorite character of all time. Like, this is the Doom story. I love this game. I mean, this is so great. The nostalgia, the familial bonds that were established playing with my family, playing Ultimate Events, or playing Ultimate Alliance. I mean, I think, honestly, if you take the plot of Ultimate Alliance, which is big picture Doctor Doom seeking ultimate power and the lengths to which he will go to achieve this. It's like my favorite Marvel event this side of 2015 Secret Wars, you know? Like, I love everything that happens in this game. Maybe if you put it on the page, it wouldn't play out as well, but in the course of a video game, it was incredible. I love this game so much that I wrote at a summer internship that I had, like, a few years after this game, every quiet moment when the boss wasn't looking, this game ends, Ultimate Alliance ends with like a tease for Galactus seeking revenge because of something that happens in the game. I wrote an entire event story called Galaxy of Galactus that was clearly a play on Age of Apocalypse, which I was also into at the time, that followed up on the Ultimate Alliance plot. I will not be sharing that today, but nonetheless, I was pretty consumed by this game, and, you know, much like Galactus consumed Earth in my plot. So, you know, maybe there is an opportunity to share that. Next game on the list is 2009's Ultimate Alliance 2 Civil War. Unfortunately, this one took a really big step back, and it in some kind of interesting ways. Ultimate Alliance 2 actually gave us a Marvel Comics event straight from the comics to the video game. And what it does is it blends the 2004-2005 miniseries written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Gabriel Delgado, Secret War. It blends that as a segue into Civil War, written by Mark Millar with art by Brian Hitch, in a way that the comics actually does not. But it does so pretty seamlessly. It makes a lot of sense. And it also makes sense in the context of what was then Ultimate Alliance continuity in playing with Doctor Doom's role in Latveria, and of course the role Latveria plays in the Secret War, not to be confused with Secret Wars, miniseries. So they were doing some interesting things saying, you know, Civil War at the time, this again, it's 2009, the event had been out for, you know, maybe a little over a year, but, you know, close to 2, depending on when in 2009 it came out. And, you know, it's saying this is the biggest comic event we've ever had. It's selling like gangbusters. Let's bring us straight to the video game. We'll use Secret War to launch there, which again, I think is some really smart writing and some interesting ways that they did that, tying the two things together, using Secret War as the catalyst to get to the Superhuman Registration Act that occurs in Civil War. Unfortunately, what happens is they bring everything sort of down to the Marvel Universe level of politics and legislation, and what you lose in that is what you had in Ultimate Alliance was this just unbridled sense that we could go anywhere. We could go absolutely anywhere in the Marvel Universe. We could have the Watcher show up at some point and tell us, hey, here's what you need to steal in order to prevent Doctor Doom from fulfilling his quest for ultimate cosmic power. Hey, let's go get something from Galactus, right? That doesn't happen in Civil War because, again, it's much more grounded. So it's a flawed game. It's still fun. I played it through several times. It's not as good as Ultimate Alliance, but it's still enjoyable. I wouldn't say it warranted the heat death of the Ultimate Universe, which is what happened after this point. It has been a decade here in 2019, as Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order, is now coming out, since we've had an Ultimate Alliance game. And obviously this is less specific to Ultimate Alliance and more specific to Marvel Entertainment and Marvel video games in particular, policies around the types of video games they were going to release and, you know, what those would look like. There's been a focus on their part on mobile gaming, you know, things like Contest of Champions, Marvel Puzzle Quest. And what happened as a result of this is really we haven't had a good Marvel video game until last year, 2018, Spider-Man PS4 broke through. And now there's this flurry of apparent new Marvel content. So it's this weird thing where from 2009 to 2019, as the MCU became the biggest thing in all of entertainment, there were like no corresponding Marvel video games. And I know there are exceptions. There was an MMORPG called Marvel Heroes that probably tapped into the Ultimate Alliance idea more than just about anything in Marvel games throughout that time. I mean, I was actually a huge fan of the turn-based role-playing game Avengers Alliance, which died several deaths. But anyway, big picture though, there wasn't that platform game like this, like until Spider-Man PS4, which gets us now to, half a year later, Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order. So, having given you the road to this game, which is now out on Switch, and I am super excited to be playing, and I'm signing up for Nintendo Online. I'm going to be playing co-op with my brothers. We're going to get back to that, that experience we had, hopefully, playing the game the first time, of course, now with a lot of new and expanded Marvel Universe knowledge, on our end. So we'll see what differences occur. But here's what I'll say of the Black Order, and I promise I won't be spoiling anything off the bat. It's fun. It's an enjoyable game. The Switch is, I think, the perfect console for it. It's a little unfortunate that it's exclusive. I would like to see as many people as possible playing this game. That said, as someone who owns a Switch, it is exciting to have it on the mobile, on the go platform. The action, the gameplay feels just like it felt a decade ago. And I think you could probably use that as a pro or a con. The gameplay here is very similar. It's beat 'em up, smash a bunch of buttons action. There's not a ton of there's a little bit of strategy you can incorporate in terms of how your teams are structured. You get certain bonuses based on, so far I've seen the Guardians of the Galaxy are all together. You get a bonus, of course. If you have all Avengers, you get a bonus. One team that I just put together, that was like one of the first ones I did, was Scarlet Witch, Crystal of the Inhumans, who's the most out there starting player by far. And here's the thing, you don't even get to play as Crystal and Lockjaw. It's just Crystal. It's a wild choice. But you get to play as Scarlet Witch, Crystal, Gamora of the Guardians, and who's my fourth, Captain Marvel, and you get a Women of Marvel bonus. So there's a little bit of strategy you can do there in terms of benefits and boosts and certain stat things, but there's not a ton. Honestly, the gameplay is really just like you're running from stage to stage, you're mashing buttons. There are some like combo type things you can do. If you've played before though, you know what you're getting into. There is zero learning curve for me, as again, I'm not an advanced gamer, as you can probably tell from this. I'm not going to review this at the game level so much. It's easy to pick up. I mean, you could play this with children. It's an all ages game, as well as, young children like myself. Anyway, Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order. It starts out with a story that's going to be very familiar to both comics and MCU fans. It's an Infinity Stone. It's an Infinity Gem story. It starts out with the Guardians sort of on the hunt, accidentally, for the Infinity Gems. We find out shortly thereafter that the titular Black Order are also seeking these. We get Proxima Midnight showing up here in the early going. Of course, she's on a quest for the stones for her master, Thanos. Has yet to be determined for me how big a role Thanos actually plays in this. I did find naming the game The Black Order kind of curious. It's a cool name, but I think if you remember from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Black Order don't actually play a huge role. I mean, they're Thanos' lackeys, but they don't get a ton of dialogue with the exception of the Ebony Maw, who just will not shut up. My favorite version of the Black Order, if you're going to read something, is Jonathan Hickman written and Jim Cheung drawn Infinity Event, which came out in 2013. It falls smack in the middle of his run on Avengers and New Avengers, which crosses over, and you kind of have to read a whole bunch of stuff to totally understand and appreciate what's going on. I would say it's well worth it. It's one of my favorites. It's my favorite Avengers run of all time. But that's where the Black Order, I think, really they get a little more development. They become more interesting characters. But even then, they now have a solo ongoing series, which you can check out. It's literally called The Black Order. That's in comic shops right now as we're talking. It's 5-issue mini. But nonetheless, interesting choice, I think. So I'm curious if the Black Order will actually play a bigger role in this game, given that it's their name on the tin. That said, this is an Infinity Gauntlet style story. It's like Avengers Infinity War. It's like Avengers Endgame. Really, the touchstone for this is the Jim Starlin written Infinity Saga and the Infinity Trilogy of the early 90s, going from Infinity Gauntlet to Infinity War to Infinity Crusade. Well, you need to know all those to understand the game? No, of course not. But those would be comics I would recommend you check out if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the story, or some connective tissue for how we get to Ultimate Alliance 3. I think more recent comics that connect would be actually the Infinity Countdown and Infinity Wars big Marvel events that occurred in 2018. I'm not a huge fan of these. I think they're somewhat compelling, if flawed in a lot of ways. Nonetheless, there's clear like synergy in terms of Infinity Countdown and Infinity Wars deal with the idea of different Marvel characters and different people throughout the universe getting Infinity Gems and kind of what they would do with those powers. And that seems to be a big part of Ultimate Alliance 3, is these gems get sort of scattered to the wind right off the bat, and we're going to have different Marvel villains all of a sudden empowered by Infinity Gems, aside from Thanos collecting all 6 in the Infinity Gauntlet. So that's where we're at with Ultimate Alliance 3. Again, it's fun. I'm most excited to play co-op. I'm most excited to see how big and wild this game can get. I think the one thing I want to see it do is I want to see it get as weird as Ultimate Alliance, the OG, got in terms of just flying around the Marvelverse, right? It's already going big in terms of going Infinity Gauntlet and in terms of employing Thanos. And I think if you're going to do that, if you're going to go that big in your first game, of this franchise and the quest, then send us to places we've never seen. I don't want to see all familiar stuff. And that's the other thing about this game. It's very Marvel Cinematic Universe influenced. It's the Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man voice. It's the fun Guardians that we know from the movies. One thing I did like in this, it's all the characters you can play offhand, with the exception, again, of Crystal of the Inhumans. And no, we're not counting the TV show. With the exception of her, they're all MCU regulars and favorites. You can play Falcon right off the bat. You can play all these faves, which is cool. And it's going to be good for people because, again, like, you have to acknowledge the MCU at this point. I want to see it expand beyond that a little bit, get to some of the more oddball comics characters, do weird stuff within Infinity Gauntlet. If we're going to play with the Infinity Gems, throw us into realities and multiverse stuff that we've never seen, kind of done in the Marvel like multimedia space. Obviously, we've seen it in comics, which is why I'm rooting for it. But that's what I hope to see. Right now, I'm trapped on the raft, New Avengers Breakout style, which is kind of the like status quo Marvel game opening at this point in time. But I think that's going to do it for me for the moment. Yeah, I'm super excited about this game. I hope everybody else is too. This was my road to Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order.